Hello, and welcome to today's discussion where I will be discussing medieval men's chaperons. But before we get started, make sure to select thumbs up if you like the video. If you happen to have questions, please post them in the comments below. And as always, please click subscribe to be updated when new videos come out. So again, welcome to men's medieval chaperons. And here are two pictures of examples of what a chaperone is. So, what exactly is a chaperone? It was a medieval men's hat. It evolved from being a hood into a hat. It was worn by upper and middle class men. It may have been worn as early as the 13th century, but it really didn't seem to take off until the 14th century. And the heyday of its time would have been during the 15th century, about mid-15th century in Burgundy. There are some examples of this hat existing in other places such as France, England, and Italy, but Burgundy in the mid-15th century was the place to see this hat worn the most. And on the left is a picture of Philip the Good, and this painting is from about 1450. He was one of the Dukes of Burgundy, and as you can see, he has a chaperon on his head. So, what are the parts of a chaperon and what makes a chaperon a chaperon? First, you have the round border, which is the poofy round circlet that sits on top of the head. Next, you have what is known as a cape or a coxcomb if it had, say, a decorative dagged edge. But the cape is the part that sits on top of the head. And then there's also the tail, which, if you know anything about medieval hoods, would have originally been the Lear pipe that now has become the tail of the chaperon. Now, if you notice, I just mentioned the word Lear pipe. If you don't know what a Lear pipe is, on the left-hand side is a painting, and you will see a medieval gentleman wearing a hood that drapes over the shoulders, goes up and over the head, and then there is a tail on the back. The Lear pipe is the tail that is on the back of the hood. So the chaperone originally was this hood, but then the men, you'd wear the hood, say horseback riding, it's cold, it keeps your head warm, but now you go inside and it's warm inside. So what do? You take the hood off, you flip it inside out, or roll up the edges, stick the face part on top of your head, roll up the edges, and now the face part has become the round poofy part that I mentioned earlier that sits as a circlet on top of your head. And the part that draped over your shoulders is now the cape that goes up and over the head. And the Lear pipe is now the tail that you swish over your shoulders as seen on the painting on the right-hand side. You will see one gentleman on the left has it sort of tucked in, but then hanging down. And then on the far right-hand side is a painting of Philip the Good. And in this painting, you will see that he has the Lear pipe wrapped from one side down and around his chin and actually tucked into his hat, almost the men's version of a barbette or a wimple, which wimples would have been worn by women. So here are some examples of medieval hoods. On the far left-hand side is just an example of a hood. You can see it draped over the shoulders and pulled back and just hanging off the back of the head. In the middle, I find this painting to be amusing, and you'll see he's got the hood wrapped around the shoulders, that's the cape part, and then the hood part that goes over the head, the one guy is actually pulling the other hood back and about ready to hit him on the head. And then on the right-hand side is from the Romance of Alexander, and again, just another example, you've got the cape part over the shoulders, and then the hood off the back of the head, and you can see the tail of the Lear pipe going down his back. Now some examples of chaperons. And you have an example here on the left-hand side from about 1412. In the middle is a painting that is at the Met. And with this one, there are different ways to wear a chaperone. And also, as the years went on, they went from just using a hood and rolling it up to actually creating its own hat style with a fat, poofy circlet on top. And that is seen here in the middle painting, where He's got the padded part on top, and then the Lear pipe. Some like to have it draped over their shoulder. Some like to, as you remember in the last page where Philip the Good, actually 2 pages ago, where he had it crossed around underneath his chin and tucked into his hood, or tucked into his hat. The gentleman in the middle and also on the left and the right just have that tail hanging down. So you had your options. If you wanted to tuck it in the hat, if you wanted to have it hanging down, draped over your shoulder, there were different ways to wear a chaperone. And then on the right-hand side is a painting by Jan van Eyck from about 1432. And more chaperone examples. On the left is Philip the Bold, who was another Duke of Burgundy from the 16th century. On the right-hand side is a portrait of a young man, and this was painted about 1469. And as you can see with him, he just has that tail draped up and over his shoulder. And more examples of a chaperone. On the left-hand side is a bust of Lorenzo de' Medici from about 1513, maybe 1520, and this is currently at the National Gallery of Art. And as you can see, he has the poofy round circlet part sitting on top of the head, the cape hanging up and over the head, and then the Lear pipe, the tail, is just draped over his shoulder. On the right-hand side are 2 examples from the Bruges Garter book from about 1430, and Sir Harry Eam and Sir Walter Pavley. I mispronounced that, I'm sorry. But as you can see, same thing. They've got that poofy circlet part on top of their head, that round part, the cape going up and over the head, and then there is a separate tail. As you can see, I am wearing a medieval hood, and here is the tail for the Lear pipe. And what they could do with the medieval hood is if you were riding a horse, or say it's really cold and it's windy, you could keep it like this, but you'll notice that my peripheral vision isn't the best. So if I want to see where I'm going, then you would just fold the hood back like this, and now I can see what's on the side of my head. And with this, because of the weight of the hood on the back, this is a wool hood, I like to keep the Lear pipe wrapped around my neck like this, because otherwise it starts to, with the weight of the tail, it starts to pull the hood back. So how did this medieval hood become a hat for the upper class? Just one moment. As you can see, I have taken off my medieval hood, and this is the hole for the face. So to make the hood into a chaperone, first you're going to fold over the face hole and fold it over a couple times. This will depend on how wide the face hole was for your hood, as far as how many times you need to fold it over to fit on top of your head. And then once you've folded it over, this has created that poofy round part, that circlet that goes on top of the head. And now you put it on top of your head, and now, as you can see, I've got the poofy round circlet part. Here is the cape, here is the tail, and then depending on how you want to wear it, you can wear it just like this. But if you don't want everything on top of your shoulders, you can then pull part of the hat on top of your head like this. And then with the tail, you can leave it hanging as is. You can tuck it up into your hat. You can just fold it over on your shoulder like this. But as you can see, this is a bit floppy. And so the floppy gave birth to a nicer chaperone, which would be better for those that were of upper or middle class. So you can see I still have that poofy round middle part, but if I zoom in, you can see it's actually much poofier. Here is my cape, and then here is my Lear pipe, and again, you can just leave it hanging. You can wrap it around and tuck it into your hat to create that chin strap, or just throw it over your shoulder. Did you know that the color of your chaperone could then determine your political allegiance? This was definitely an example of what was happening in the 14th century. For example, in Paris in 1356, if you wore red, then that meant you were pro-Paris. This was during the time when John II of France was held captive by England, and this was right at the beginning of the 100 Years' War. Well, near the beginning. However, if you wore blue, then that meant you were pro-Navarre. Charles II of Navarre said he had a claim to the French throne, and so depending on if you wore red or if you wore blue, then would determine which side you were for. Just the same in 1379, if you wore white, that was for those who were against Duke Philip the Bold of Burgundy. I have to admit, the colors, it kind of reminds me of the War of the Roses, where if you were white or if you wore red, this was just another way of wearing a color to say what your political allegiance was without actually having to say anything at all. As far as colors, looking at various paintings, black seems to have been the most popular, but other colors could have been used without determining a political allegiance. If you have more questions regarding what was in today's discussion, here is my Works Cited page. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. Remember to select thumbs up if you like the video, and as always, please subscribe to be updated when new videos come out.